We've got some pretty big New York Rangers news to take a look at here today involving a couple different things. One being Will Borgen, who ended up recently, this past weekend, signing a pretty big extension with the New York Rangers, a 5-year deal worth about $4.1 million per season. He ended up kind of speaking out on that new extension with the Rangers and kind of, gave his thoughts on kind of him, coming to New York and all that kind of stuff there. So we'll take a look kind of what he had to say about signing his new extension and kind of committing the next 5 seasons of his NHL career potentially to the Rangers, as well as we'll take a look at some pretty big JT Miller / Elias Pettersson kind of trade news here, as Jim Rutherford, the Vancouver Canucks president of hockey operations, ended up having a pretty big interview and said some very important and impactful things involving this kind of trade situation here involving JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, their kind of, issues behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff and involved in the trade talks here. So we'll take a look at all that news in today's video. So starting off here, let's take a look at some of the news that we got from the interview from Jim Rutherford, the Vancouver Canucks president of hockey operations. And this interview was done by the Globe and Mail's Gary Mason, which was published on Tuesday. And they basically obviously kind of talked about this whole situation here with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson, which has been going on for a while now, it seems like, and they've just been kind of having some beef and some issues kind of behind the scenes there, I guess, not getting along very well. And apparently, from what Jim Rutherford ends up saying here, that it definitely seems like they're not going to be able to kind of fix things. And, for two grown men making millions of dollars, you think they could kind of come to some kind of an agreement, but obviously things can't be figured out. So one of them is seemingly at least going to be traded away, and whether it's Elias Pettersson or JT Miller, at this moment we don't exactly know, because there's been reports on either one of them getting traded away. But involving the Rangers, we have definitely seen so many more reports kind of talking about the JT Miller side of things there, and there have been a lot of kind of mixed emotions amongst Rangers fans about acquiring him. And I do think that, yes, JT 100% is a top 6 caliber player. I don't think anyone's really debating that. But I really do think the main kind of part of this is just really kind of depending on what ends up happening. If a trade does happen, what is involved in this deal? What are the Rangers having to give up to get JT Miller? Because this team has already kind of locked themselves into someone like Mika Zibanejad more than likely for the long term. And, both these players, Zibanejad and Miller, both are about the same age and both have the exact same length of contracts. They end at the exact same time. And, JT Miller's making $8 million and Zibanejad making $8.5 million. They're both, not in the prime of their careers, on the kind of back half of their careers, on the wrong side of 30. So both them making a combined $16.5 million for two kind of aging centers. And, I think Zibanejad can be a fine guy going forward, and JT Miller can definitely be a pretty good star caliber guy for at least another few seasons. But if you do trade for a guy, JT Miller, you really are committing yourself to two aging centermen who, down the road in 3-4 years really may not be playing the overall best hockey. And yes, the cap's going to go up a lot, but that's still $16.5 million. They're going to be committing the two centermen, and obviously JT can play a bit on the wing as well, which does provide some versatility. But just in general, that is kind of the big thing there, is you have to be okay with really committing yourself to two guys down the middle for more than likely the foreseeable future, because they do have quite a bit of term, both of them, left on their deals. But let's take a look here and really kind of dive into this, because I think from what this is kind of telling here in these interviews is that the Canucks really don't have a ton of leverage. So maybe the Rangers can possibly go out there and maybe snag an Elias Pettersson or more than likely a JT Miller in a trade and really kind of acquire one of these players for not an insane amount like they normally would be going for, on a normal market where obviously there's not all this kind of stuff going on in the background. And now taking a look at the quotes here from Jim Rutherford, and he ends up saying, "I felt like for a long time that there was a solution here because everybody has worked on it, including the parties involved," Rutherford told Mason. "But it only gets resolved for a short period of time and then it festers again. And so it certainly appears like there's not a good solution that would keep this group together." So that's obviously not a great thing for the Canucks there, which it seemed like maybe a second there that could have possibly managed to get things figured out, but they don't. And now we're here where both players have been in a lot of different trade rumors. There's been a ton of trade talk and rumors and news and updates going around over the past, weeks and months now, it feels like. So it's definitely going to be interesting to kind of see what happens going forward. And we also have another quote here where he ends up saying, "We're talking about two of our top players," Rutherford said. "Certainly our two best forwards. It can be really tough on a franchise, not only present, but into the future. When you're planning on peaking this team into a contending team, and then you find out that's not going to happen, or at least it's not going to happen with the group we have now, then you have to put together a new plan." And obviously, that's what's seemingly kind of been trying to possibly happen for a bit now, with them looking to trade away one of the two players. And obviously, we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And you're probably going to be able to get, I would say, a bigger package, I'd imagine, for Elias Pettersson because he is a younger guy. But you also have to consider the contract that Elias does have, it being quite a bit bigger than obviously JT's. But I would say JT, you could definitely argue at this moment is maybe the better player. And really and truly overall, right now, neither of these two guys, Elias Pettersson or JT Miller, are really playing their best hockey of their careers. But obviously, I think, going forward into the future, long term, Elias Pettersson is obviously the better fit. But you also have to consider the right now, and I would definitely give that to kind of JT Miller. So overall, it definitely makes more sense for the Canucks to probably trade away Miller. Although you're not going to get maybe as much, you're probably going to be keeping the better long-term piece. But you have to consider that the Canucks maybe really want to start pushing themselves along here, really start trying to compete like right now. And maybe they view JT Miller as a better option. I mean, I have no idea. I'm speculating here, so we'll have to wait and see kind of what they do. And I still feel like they're going to trade away JT Miller, not Pettersson, but I could be wrong. And now we've got the last quote here before we take a look at the Will Borgen news. But starting off here, they end up saying in the article, Rutherford told Mason he has held talks with both players to try to get them to see if they could coexist for the good of the team. And then he says, quote, "We've had those conversations, and I think the parties understand that, and I think they've tried," Rutherford said. "As you know, sometimes emotions get deep, and as much as people try, sometimes you can't get over it. It certainly appears that's what's going on here." And that is, pretty sad to hear because these are two, professional athletes who just cannot get over whatever their issues or problems are. And I don't want to talk about it too much because we don't exactly know what their issues have been, whether it's kind of hockey related or not. I mean, I have no idea. I'm not going to speculate too much, but at the end of the day, this is something where it seems like we're going to see a big trade happen at some point, whether it is Elias Pettersson or whether it is JT Miller. And I don't think the Canucks are in the best spot leverage-wise to get a deal done, to get the absolute most value out of either of these guys kind of possible. So I do think that the Rangers are in a spot where they are desperate to go out there and get that superstar/star caliber player, and either of these guys kind of fits that. I mean, both these guys are star/superstar caliber guys at moments. I mean, maybe right now, maybe either of them aren't playing like a superstar, but they both can be those level of kind of players. So I think overall, going out there, if the Rangers can go out there and get one of these guys for a pretty good trade, then maybe it definitely would make sense for this team to make that happen. And now we've got a quote here from Will Borgen, who ended up speaking about his new contract extension with the New York Rangers. And he ended up saying, quote, "Pretty quickly, Borgen said about when he knew he wanted to stay in New York long term. Once I got settled into the place and got used to everything, it was nothing but great. I like this city a lot. The guys here are great. The organization, everything's just been great. It's been fun to play here." And that is nice to hear. Obviously, that Will, a pretty new player to this team, hasn't played even 20 games yet with the squad, is having a great time. Obviously, it seems like the locker room is pretty good, which, for a team who's definitely had their ups and downs, it's nice to hear that, a new player coming in isn't coming into a, just terrible, kind of sad, depressing kind of situation with where the team was at exactly when this trade going to happen, because he didn't get traded in here when this team was obviously kind of taking these big steps in January. He was traded away before that. So this is someone who, played with this team throughout some of the bad stuff from this season, and obviously still had some fun, I guess, still didn't think things were too bad, but obviously I'm sure that money that he got offered definitely didn't hurt his acceptance of that deal, I'd imagine. So I think overall, it is nice to hear that he's having a good time, I guess, in New York, and he likes the city and all that kind of stuff. I have, talked about it in previous video, obviously kind of breaking down this whole kind of extension and stuff like that. So if you want to, definitely go check it out. I have two videos kind of talking about it. One specifically kind of going in depth just on the Borgen deal, as well as I kind of talked about some of the other extensions in yesterday's video that we have seen from the Rangers. So if you have not already, go check that video out. But I just think overall, as a whole, Will Borgen, decent contract. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that deal in this video, but I just think, it's an okay deal. And at the end of the day, Will Borgen will hopefully be a pretty decent contributor for this team. Not going to be in a top pairing role. I think can be a fine second pairing kind of guy and just should be a solid player for this team. Hopefully won't be much of a liability, which is kind of the main thing that this team needs more of, was just players who can be solid defensemen, which I think he definitely can be for this team. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed, definitely hit that like and subscribe button for daily New York Rangers content. And also, definitely don't forget to comment down below your thoughts on Will Borgen and him signing that new contract extension with the Rangers, as well as your thoughts on this new news that we have involving the New York Rangers and the Vancouver Canucks with that JT Miller trade situation as a whole. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next one. Let's go Rangers.